What were we feeling about this one?
Yeah, so we'll start non-spoilers. I loved it.
Me too.
Truthfully, I again, like we were saying last week, how in the prior episodes before episode 4, I was like, I want more, but in like a negative way. And then
Right.
episode 4, and now this one, I'm like, the episode ends, and I'm like, no.
But it's because it's so good.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So that's my like general impressions is I want more of this, and I'm getting Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2 excitement like vibes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a good place to be in.
For sure. And like for me, it's this episode went so far. I mean, I guess some of the reviews I've seen, I guess the bad ones have been from like actual critics. And like, it seems like the entire Star Wars like fandom is loving this episode, but those bad reviews are like, why, they couldn't capture the energy of like Rebels and whatnot, or Clone Wars. And there was too much fighting going on. And I'm like, look, and then people are like, and it's fan service maybe. And I was like, this plot serves so well both characters, Ahsoka and Anakin. And sorry if that's a spoiler, but if you've been watching this whole time, then you wouldn't be watching this episode.
Sure.
Yeah. So this serves both their characters super well, and it goes to new places, and it takes like new risks that I've been wanting Star Wars to take for a long time, and it goes out of their comfort zone, I think, and it's super exciting, and the plot's really well done, and it's not even like a fast moving plot. It's just it's a character development plot, and it works so well.
Yeah, I think for the first time in the series that it's called Ahsoka, I felt like this episode was actually about Ahsoka.
Right.
And we were criticizing, I think maybe you were criticizing a bit more that Ahsoka was too much of like a stoic sort of arm crossing character that didn't have the personality that Rosario Dawson.
She's always arm crossed a lot, but
sure, but like, wow, it was when we were seeing her in like Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian, like there was a lot more present, I don't know, energy. There's a different way.
Sure.
And I feel like this episode we got a lot of that back, which was great. And
I agree. But it helped that there was like other actors playing Ahsoka as well,
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, without getting the spoilers,
that was a minor spoiler, but we can get into spoilers now if you want.
But yeah, I thought it was fantastic.
Really good episode. Yeah. So spoiler territory now. So if you want to turn it off, you can. But this episode starts off not with Ahsoka like we started off or ended last episode, but with Hera and Jason, and
who is. I love Jason.
Jason was like the second star of this episode for me. He was amazing. Basically, Jason and the other rebel officers, or maybe not rebel officers anymore, but
New Republic.
Yeah, New Republic officers are trying to find Ahsoka and Sabine, and they think they're together. But just before they're about to kind of give up the search, Jason's like, "Hey Ma, do you hear that?" And Hera, because she was married to a Jedi, was I think is definitely more open to these kind of things. And she hears it, which is pretty wild too. But yeah, they basically hear these lightsabers clashing, kind of as the waves are coming in, and so, but that's kind of later in the episode. But yeah, they basically find Huyang, kind of grieving over the loss of his friends, saying they should have listened to him, and then we cut back to the world between worlds, and we get Ahsoka and Anakin. I would say I was maybe a little worried at first because they go really quickly into a fight scene where, you know, and I was worried we weren't going to get like that, like the talks they needed, and we eventually do. But before the fight, Anakin is like, what does he say? He's like, if you remember that, like how you died, then or how you got here, then that's a good sign. And now your final lesson is to live or die. Oh. And they start fighting. And here's the thing. But it
was so good because it was like
great.
He's like, I'm not gonna fight you. And he's like, I've heard that before.
Yeah. But it was so good to see like someone from the prequel era fighting again.
Oh God, it was amazing.
It reminded me how much I've missed that fighting style.
Yeah,
you know?
I love that fighting style.
Oh, it's so good. And that fight scene was genuinely, I mean, throughout the episode, their fights were some of the best I've seen in like recent Star Wars.
Yeah, I bring back prequel era fighting.
Please.
It's so like, it's so good. I mean, seeing like Anakin at that time just doing those, I don't care that people are like, why do you have to flip around? So it's dope.
It's so dope. Yeah.
Just keep it. And to see him do those moves again, it like, I was getting a lot of chills.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I don't know if that's because I grew up and with those movies or if it was just genuinely like very cool to watch, because I think it was done really well. And I think those fights were like, and they all had narrative purpose.
Right.
So
I mean, I would say, like, to combat your point of like growing up with it, I didn't start to love the prequels until I was like an adult. You know, I wasn't huge into them as a kid. Right. So, yeah, I think like, at least for me, it's not like nostalgia. It's just like, that's the era of Star Wars that I really love. And that's probably super controversial. Like I might have like a more personal favorite.
I don't think it is for like people that are like our age.
Sure,
I don't think that's anywhere near as controversial as it used to be.
That's very fair. But I would say half the fan base would find that controversial. But
there's also a bunch of people who like the sequels. which I like. I like some of the sequels.
I mean, I think like in 15 years we're going to start seeing like a bunch of, you know, young adults saying, "Oh, the sequel era was great, guys."
I can totally see that. I mean, if they don't like burn out and, you know, make like, you know,
a ton of shows and movies.
Yeah, but I mean, I could see that. I would argue that we'll have to see, but I would argue that there's things that happen, especially when you get to episode 9, that at least the prequels, narratively, there were not any plot hole. I mean, maybe like, because they say like they fill things out in the Clone Wars show, but like for the most part, like there isn't like, and this person who is dead is just back and we're just all going to accept it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not BS storytelling.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Ahsoka.
Sure.
So I mean, you know, basically as I described, that whole Jason plot line is him kind of, you know, going through the motions of like, even at the end of last episode, he was like, "Hey Mom, I have a bad feeling." And so he's insanely force sensitive. He can feel everything that was happening to Ahsoka. And so, yeah, basically we're cutting back and forth between that storyline and the Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds storyline. But basically after their first initial fight, Anakin cuts the bridge that they're on, and she falls into like season 1 of the Clone Wars. And she's, you know, I don't know if you recognize the actress who played young Ahsoka, but
no.
She's the actress who did young Gamora in Infinity War.
Oh, cool.
And I guess she's also the actress who played the kind of like mean girl in like of the mom and Barbie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it was cool.
Why did
to
that
see
got
that.
a bigger reaction out of me than the young Gamora one?
I mean, I'm more of a fan of the young Gamora, but
I think I'm a bigger fan of her in the Barbie movie.
Sure. But I think she nailed it as young Ahsoka, to me at least. Like, obviously, like she doesn't look exactly the same, or the voice isn't exactly the same. But I thought it was so cool to see like a live action young Ahsoka with Anakin, and Anakin was wearing all like the original outfits from the show.
Yeah,
and
it was really cool to see the like the war, Jedi Knight sort of side that I always love that in the animation that we would
because
get.
it's such a like, what would you call that? Not like a maybe it's a hypocrisy of the Jedi code, like just them being generals in a war. It's so like foreign to see the Jedi doing that, and that's why I kind of love that era.
But I would love to see. It might be a little hard to do, but I would love, like, one of my favorite outfits is Obi-Wan when he's like in his like similar like, and he's in
his Clone Wars outfit,
the clone out. Oh my god, that is the dopest outfit. I love that. I would love to see that one day.
But yeah, so the conversations.
Actually, I want to say, like, when he cut that bridge, and she's like falling, and then it turns pink. Mm-hmm. I was just like, what's going on? Like, it was genuinely this like moment of like wonder, and I was just like gripped.
Absolutely.
I was like, what is? But I will say the one critique of this episode is these particular, as cool as it is to see the clones running, like the beginning shot where the clones are like running in, past the camera and whatnot, and
they brought back Tamora Anderson Emerson for that.
Tamora Morrison.
There it is. Yeah.
And there's Captain Rex, which is cool, for a little bit. But I will say the one problem I did have is all of those Clone Wars scenes are particularly, I would have liked a bit more of a budget put behind it, because it did feel very like noticeably on a set.
I would say differently, because I loved how tight the scene was. Like, to me, it was more of like a dreamlike memory rather than like being implanted inside the actual time of the Clone Wars, and it allowed us to like really focus on the conversations that were going on between Ahsoka and Anakin. So I was totally fine with it, but yeah, I could see your complaint.
Yeah, it just felt like we were on a volume set, and there was a reason why we couldn't see anything in the background, and it just noticeably felt different than even when they're up on the bridge. Right. It just felt different. But I mean, regardless, all of that's great. I mean, going from her with, starting off with like a green lightsaber, and I just like, even though like I didn't really watch the show, I would remember having commercials for it going on Cartoon Network, and being like, I would remember there being like this character named Ahsoka, and she'd be young and have the green lightsaber, and then eventually we get to the one where she has both the two lightsabers, and
so that scene is I guess from the last like season 7 of the Clone Wars, where she's dual lightsabering and she's by herself, and it's the Siege of Mandalore,
which I was like, cool.
That was like, so cool.
The Darth Maul-esque like kind of Mandalorian, the ones that follow Maul or his like brother or something, they're I was like, yeah, that was super sick. And it was cool also, like, you got to see like Anakin in that first scene, like the going back, and then you see him again in that other scene that we're talking about, and he's got the scar, and he's noticeably like looking kind of more evil. And I love how there was all the switches, to like him walking off in the distance, then it flashes and it's Vader, and then it goes back to him.
Those transitions were amazing.
And then the same thing when he like is like, like when they do the final fight and he's like walking towards them and they have those like the lightning-ish flashes and he's like Vader and has the red lightsaber and he looks sickly. And then it's, you know, when they finish it and he's like, there's hope for you yet. And like, he kind of, I don't know how they do it, but he kind of turns back into like a somewhat like normal, good version of himself.
Oh, you're talking about like the very ending of that whole conflict.
Yeah. But I just appreciate how well done that all of that was.
Did you see though that there was some of that Sith in her eyes as well?
No.
Yeah. When she was like holding it to his neck, like her eyes were like a little Sithy.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I didn't either until I saw like pictures afterwards. But yeah, I love that. If you haven't caught on, I guess if you're listening and haven't watched the episode, that this theme of this whole conflict and experience in the world between worlds was to like, I guess, face her guilt with how she felt about Anakin and kind of get her to move past her feeling like she's at fault for all of this, that she's part of this legacy of death and destruction, kind of like Baylan Skoll was saying right before she fell off the cliff.
Though I will say there hasn't been a whole lot of, like, if you haven't watched those Clone Wars or are aware of any of this, I do feel like it is a bit out of the blue. Like, what's going on here? That's
my only complaint at the moment, is that I wish we saw her struggle with this a bit more throughout the first 3 episodes.
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. She's been living with this guilt for like 30 years now. So I get why it's not like super strong at the forefront of the story. But yeah, I think her choosing to let go and you know, both of them live, and that she doesn't feel like she needs to put an end to Anakin is pretty great. And I love that development for the character. And I love that Anakin gets to kind of just be this guardian of this like realm that the world between worlds is. And yeah, I think it all works so well for me. That
well,
resolution.
what do you like? What is the world between worlds like?
So I read up on it a little bit. Basically, that was like, it was a theorized place within the Force at one point, and so Darth Sidious became kind of obsessed with getting there. But basically, it's it's a place within the Force that's like a maze and cavern of like doors and paths leading to like other times and in space, or like in place. And so yeah, that's why I think we were kind of worried last week that this could be like a multiverse, because it very much is like a time travel area, which is why they were able to go back and time travel into these.
Which this way is appropriate.
Yes, this way is super appropriate, but doing it in a time travel multiverse sense is bad.
God, kill me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I am intrigued. Like, can a lot of people go there? Is it just Anakin? I also appreciate that it's if this is still him in like a Force ghost, like existing.
I think it is. I think that was fully Anakin.
I appreciate that it is still showing all the different sides of him. Like, he's constantly going to be between the good and the bad. Yeah. You know.
I love that it wasn't just like he's fully good now. He's obviously both sides, you know?
Yeah. And which I think I appreciate, as opposed to, oh yeah, he's a
good guy. Yeah.
I mean, it does. I think it makes sense. I just like, as a kid, when like Luke, you know, when he saves Luke and kills the Emperor, there's a bit of my brain that's like, he's completely redeemed, but obviously he's not.
He's not, because he did 20 years of tormenting on the galaxy. So yeah.
But I think it's great for like an Anakin legacy. I don't know why I get the feeling like we might see him again.
I agree.
The series.
I think we will. I don't know how, and maybe.
Because I want to know what that like. Maybe. Sorry. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, is is when he says there's hope for you yet, is that implying that he knows something, or is that just like, oh, I think you'll turn out okay? And that was just, that'll be
what did he
it.
say?
Like there's hope for you yet.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just think that was him like being proud that she like got the lesson, that she didn't have to have this guilt, like of like, remember like in the middle of the episode, he was like, he got frustrated almost with her, that like she was focusing on this like legacy of death and destruction, and that basically he's like, we none of us realized that you were so dangerous and powerful as you were, and so I think by the end he was like, good, you can move on from the trauma that I gave you, and you can live your life. And I think that was the hope he has. But yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's a possibility we don't see him again, and this is like the way to explain it, because like maybe he is this guardian of this like world between worlds area, and maybe he can't leave to be a Force ghost in like the normal world.
But I mean, he did show up as a Force ghost, and
sure, but that was before. I mean, that was like right after he died, so he could have been appointed, or
appointed.
left.
There's like a hierarchy in the Force.
Well, I mean, there are like 5 Force ghosts now, right? So
what do you mean?
I guess there's only 4 now. Yeah. Okay.
I would imagine that there's a lot of Force ghosts.
The first one was Qui-Gon.
Oh,
he was the first to learn it, and he wasn't even a fully.
Okay,
he wasn't supposed to be a full Force ghost, right?
I see what you're saying. What you're saying. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yep. But yeah, so they basically, Ahsoka, lives, and she floats to the top of the water, and the New Republic's able to find her.
Well, they dive in and drag her out,
but she's floating towards the top of the water. I mean,
I don't know. I feel like she was pretty much like just there,
Okay.
Whatever. Why am I arguing? This is stupid.
But yeah, so she goes and gets some recovery at the ship, and basically Hera's like, look, you figure out a way to find Sabine, and
my god,
that was great. You're talking about the Force memory, right?
Oh my god. Great.
I was so happy that we finally got something like this. I feel like they're getting some inspiration from Fallen Order.
Yeah.
That was amazing to see. I love that she hid it from Hera. I thought that was an interesting choice. Because I think well, here's the thing. I think Ahsoka knows that Sabine went willingly, but she's not saying that to Hera.
That's I could see that. I also think it's vague enough with the audio that we hear while she's doing that it's unclear what exactly happened.
It's possible.
But I also agree that there is that possibility that she didn't say that to her. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so then Ahsoka, after getting told to find a way to find Sabine, is like, looks up at the sky and sees a horde of Purgales. Is that what you call them?
Purgles.
Purgles. And so, yeah, I think you see them flying. At least in my mind, I was like, oh, they're flying in the direction of like where they beamed off to. So that's just where they're going to be heading. But Ahsoka was like, nah, I'm just going to try and talk to them, and then they're just going to like take us somewhere. Which is an interesting idea.
So in I think it might be season 2. There is a planet that Ezra and all of them go to that is specifically like a mining colony that it also happens to be like where they extract some sort of source that like the I don't know, the Empire needs for like hyperdrive shit and whatnot. and like the Purgles also, like that's one of their places that they like are around, and they're like a nuisance and whatever. But like Ezra like ends up like communicating with them, and like they kind of have these routes that they go on.
Mm-hmm.
And at least from watching Rebels, like I feel like there's a bit of like they all kind of understand that like Purgles have a bit of a intelligence, and like they do have these routes they go on where they're like migrating.
Right.
So
it's possible.
It's not complete. Like I do appreciate that they're like the New Republic guys like, you're not gonna believe me, and then
yeah. But they were also very like famously in the finale of like the Rebels, right?
Right. I mean, they've been like an ongoing.
Okay.
Like Ezra has a very specifically like, in touch with,
There's a theory because season like the Mandalorian season 3 and this are happening like at the same time, I think. There's a theory that the Purgles that like Grogu saw while they were like in space was like Ahsoka actually like on them, or like in one of them, and that's like why he looked and like sensed
that'd
something.
Be cool.
I was like, cool. Okay, that's neat. That would give some reason for that scene,
I thought it could have been like really cheesy, but I think it was done really well, and I did like all of them like evasive maneuvers, and then they're all like floating. But I also loved like that there's like light speed abilities in a animal. Like that's insane to me. But I love it. Well, that's, I guess, like they are like the inspiration for
like that's how they got light speed technology or something
sort of.
Like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why they go to those planets to feed on the same energy source that all of the people in the universe use for their hyperdrive cores and whatnot. And so the Purgles are like going there and they need to feed, but then they like were like blasting them away, and we're like, no, and like they couldn't migrate, and they were like getting ill and whatnot.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a bit of lore there.
Yeah.
But what happens if Ahsoka next episode just nowhere near where she needs to be? She
has to be, right?
Yeah, no, for sure she will. Yeah. But
that would be hilarious. She's like on the like the opposite end of the universe.
She's
like in Tatooine.
This was such a stupid decision.
That's how we get back to Tatooine again. Yeah.
Oh God, that would
be so bad. I don't want to see Tatooine for like years.
Anakin
honestly.
shows up. I have another lesson for you.
Yeah. But
this one's about sand people.
And I hate sand.
Let me teach you what to avoid when you're around sand.
But yeah, I think that's our thoughts. We love this episode. It's a strong one, and really looking forward to the rest of the series.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely, this show has turned around for me in a very big way.
Yeah, these last 2 episodes were very, very good.
Yeah.